We will now begin the regular meeting of the Board of Estimate and Apportionment. Today is Wednesday, September 23rd, 2015. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Slay.
Present.
Comptroller Green. Here. President Reed.
Here. Items presented for the first time. Item number 1, request from the Controller's Office for approval of contracts and leases for various city departments as listed on Exhibit A. Item 2, request from the Controller's Office for approval of intra-departmental and interdepartmental transfers from various city departments as listed on Exhibit B. Item 3, request from the Controller's Office for approval of transfers between projects for capital improvement funds listed on Exhibit C. Item 4, request from the Director of Airports for approval of Board Bill Number 175. This ordinance authorizes and directs the Director of Airports and the Controller to enter into and execute a 60-day build-out period followed by 7 contract years from November 1st, 2015 through December 31st, 2022 at Lambert St. Louis International Airport. Item number 5, request from the Director of Airports for approval of Board Bill Number 174. This ordinance authorizes and directs the Director of Airport and the Controller to enter into and execute a 1-year lease with up to 14 one-year renewals at Lambert St. Louis International Airport. Item 6, request from the Commissioner of Equipment Services, Board of Public Service, for approval of the FY 2016 Vehicle Assignment Survey. And then there are additional items the Board may wish to discuss, and the PFM will give a presentation regarding the St. Louis City financial outlook. Focus will be Moody's rating and pilot recommendation and implementation. That's the extent of the items presented. If we have any, is there any discussion about any of the items? We have a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve items 1 through 6 as printed. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it unanimously. Items 1 through 6 have been approved. Okay. Now at this time, we will take up the PFM presentation. Madam Controller, would you like to make any introductory remarks?
I'd like the PFM staff to please come to the table and introduce yourselves as you pass out the reports, please.
All right, thank you so much.
Rebecca, you want to head out the introductions, please?
Sure. Good afternoon. Thanks very much for having us here. My name is Rebecca Perry-Glickstein. I'm a director with Public Financial Management, Inc., which is an independent financial advisory firm. I've been the city's financial advisor for any number of years, 15 years or so. So again, thanks for having us. This is Mike Nadal, who is the managing director at PFM and the management and budgeting consulting group. As indicated, we're here to talk a little bit about the credit update, as well as the long-range financial plan and the pilot project. The presentation before you, if you flip ahead to slide 3, briefly, I'm just going to give you an update on where the city's ratings are and the recent action by Moody's. You'll see at the chart at the top, the city's current general obligation ratings are A1, A+, AA-, A1 by Moody's, A+ by S&P, and a AA- by Fitch ratings. AA- rating from Fitch is the highest rating that the city has. The A1 and A+ ratings from Moody's and S&P respectively are equivalent to each other, and they're the highest grade in the A rating category. Moody's earlier this year, actually last month in August, downgraded the city's rating from a AA3 to that current A1 rating. And I'm going to talk just a little bit about that and the things that they pointed out. You should know that all of the rating agencies have undergone or are getting ready to undergo a change in their criteria, their rating methodology, the way they weight things, how they look at things. Moody's has recently done such a methodology change. This is the first time they've looked at the city's rating since they did that methodology change, and that certainly plays into some of the downgrade actions. S&P did their methodology change some time ago. The city's A+ rating has been in place for a while. There was no change pursuant to that methodology change. Fitch has a AA- rating, and just want to say they have just introduced their methodology changes. We will review those and see if we think there'll be any impact on the city in terms of the city's ratings. If you flip the page, I just want to highlight for you some of the items, both the challenges as well as strengths and outlook factors that Moody's indicated in the report. And I would also like to say that the A1 rating category, where the city is now, the second largest number of cities that Moody's rates is in that category. So we're not an outlier. It's a high A rating, and they see a lot of strength. They see also challenges, a weak socioeconomic profile. So that's population decline, it's median family income, it's housing values, poverty rates. Those have long been, issues in the city, and they continue to be issues. And Moody's has, continued to point those out. Also, as we're all aware of, the need to reauthorize the earnings tax every 5 years. While on the first vote it was clearly that the city was anxious to keep that significant part of the budget, there's still the fact that every 5 years people have to vote on it. And even though, and Moody's says they don't expect that the earnings tax will go away, it still exists, and it's something that they have to factor in. Relatively narrow financial position, that's liquidity, that's fund balance, it's how much surplus cash the city has to deal with unexpected occurrences without having to, take money from some other project or a service or something like that. The ability to deal with unexpected occurrences, downturns in the economy, etc. The city has been pretty stable in terms of where the surplus deficit levels are in terms of operations, but every year there's the struggle to balance the budget, and what Moody's is reacting to is that's not getting worse, but it's not kind of getting better as fast as they would like to see. And then lastly, the high debt burden and the factors that go into that have to do with the housing values, which have been declining. So it's a relative factor, but it is something that they point out. I'd like to say, and Mike will talk a little bit about it in the long-range plan, one of the things we talked about was the city's need to establish an ongoing capital borrowing program, which of course means more debt. When you're thinking about credit ratings, it's important to remember, clearly the higher the rating, the better, but at some point you have to balance what you need to do as a government and for your constituents and kind of what your rating is. And so that's something to kind of keep in mind just going forward in general.
Okay, on the housing values, can you kind of tell me how that finding was
So if you look at
declining housing values?
It's the full market value of the property of the city, and just if you go back to page 18, there's in the appendix, where did it go? The total full value is about almost 17 billion, which in and of itself is, that's a AAA rated value, that level. But as I said, looking at the per capita value in terms of the population, and so that the population feeds into the value. And if you look across, page 18 is our other A1 rated cities, and if you go back to and 20, we've also looked at the city compared to AA rated cities and to AAA rated cities. And what you'll see is the full value per capita levels for the higher rated cities, and there are always some exceptions. There's not a total straight line, but it tends to be higher.
So you're saying compared to other cities, our housing values on a per capita basis are being reduced?
Yes, exactly. It's on a per capita basis, right? And there also, and I don't have this sheet in front of me, but in the CAFR, in the statistical section, you'll see the value of the housing stock, and it has been declining slightly. And I think there's been starting to maybe stabilize, turn around, but the rating agencies are doing a historical trend look, and so that's what they're analyzing. Back to, I guess it's page 4. So those are the challenges, but there are also a lot of strengths. There's a sizable tax base. We just talked about that. Again, the financial performance has been stable and improving slightly, so it has not been getting worse. And we're, I think, still hoping for a surplus, a small surplus. So this is stable performance, and that's good. And they just want to see us start to get better, to have more surplus, more positive trend, to not for each year kind of be facing that operating gap. Also, the city has done a tremendous job in trying and kind of reining in its expenses and taking mid-year actions to bring in lower expenses as gaps may appear. And full credit for that. The city's management score is very good and recognized in the reporting. Certainly, the city is a center of the regional hub. It's this is an extremely strong region, and the city benefits from that in terms of the rating analysis. And there's also the city's debt. So with high debt burden, but the city also has, for much of its debt, dedicated revenue streams. So parks bonds have dedicated sales tax. The recreation centers have a dedicated sales tax. So this debt is not all drawing off of money that would otherwise be available for general fund activities, for regular operating activities, and we get credit for that. The outlook, the management adjustments, as I said, full credit for that. The financial, the operating budget has been getting closer and closer. Every year that passes, the gap is smaller and smaller and smaller, and that's very good progress, expecting a surplus. And we've indicated that here. I won't go through page 5 in detail. These are just their Moody's view of what could make the rating go up, what could make the rating go down, and just based on kind of the challenges and the strengths, they're fairly evident. Positive trends in socioeconomics, hard to get at, not something that happens overnight, but that's one of the things we're looking at. Debt burden, again, something to consider. With that, that's the update that I wanted to provide to you. So let's ask if there are any questions before turning it to Mike.
Thank you. So, as I believe you all know, over the course of roughly the past year, at the initiation of the controller, we've been working on the development of a long-range financial forecast and identification of key budget drivers and options for the city. We've had the chance to work closely with the mayor's staff, senior staff, meet with the council president, work closely with Mr. Payne, and try to integrate the local understanding you all have into a forecast, and again, identification of some of the major factors driving that forecast. And doing this is important for a couple of reasons. If you look at page 6, it is a recognized positive factor in credit ratings. It's a recognized best practice by the leading industry groups. But I'd note that it has those characteristics for a reason. If you're looking out ahead when you're still in solid shape and in a sound position, it's much easier to make the adjustments you need to make to stay in good shape and to move into even better position than if you're in a crisis mode. And unfortunately, I've had the chance to work with a number of distressed governments over the years. And your position and the choices you have, while some of them are challenging, are far better than than for those clients I've had who waited to take this kind of look until it was almost too late. On page 7, we provide a snapshot of a base case scenario, looking at your projected revenues with no changes, just current law, carrying forward current tax rates and fee structures in the blue line, and the red line of expenditures. And this was done off the FY15 budget, so you've now with the fiscal 16 budget, corrected yet again this underlying structural imbalance, but that's still here. And a couple of comments about it from the perspective of working with places around the country. The first is that this is not an extraordinary challenge. Almost every local government faces some of these same structural pressures. The federal government's forecast across the state and local sector as a whole that there's about an 18% challenge that most governments face, again, across the state and local sector. Why is that? By and large, revenues hopefully keep pace with economic growth, but healthcare costs, which are so much a part of your budget, are growing faster. And depending on the overall environment, pension costs and other key factors can also outpace revenues. And so what you see here is far from unique, and in many ways it's a little more moderate, a little more under control than what we see in many places, which I think speaks well to the leadership you all have shown and the good work your teams have done. But at the same time, these pressures are real. They are reflective of some need for further action to continue to stay ahead of these trends. And I would further note that what you see on page 7 is the base case under a mainstream kind of economic set of conditions, not assuming another downturn. And as we'll talk about in a minute, and as is contained in the full long-range plan that you all have had a chance to receive, in a downturn, some of these factors could be worse. And some of the key stories in terms of what's driving those trend lines emerge on page 8, where you see most of the city's revenue sources likely to grow, but they don't grow that quickly. You don't have any home run revenue sources that harness any kind of quick rates of growth. It's all pretty modest. And even with similarly moderate inflation, healthcare inflation can just kind of push the spending up above the revenue line and create this pressure for you. I'd also note on this line that with a base case forecast, we're seeing your pensions begin to trend down as the effects of some better years with your investment returns post-recession, the effects of your pension reforms with the firefighters have started to take root. That point of pressure is stabilizing, but in the event of another economic downturn with some of the market losses we've already seen in recent months that aren't yet reflected in your new actuarial reports, that could easily turn around in a different scenario. And one of the things that we talk to a lot of our clients about is highlighted on page 9, which is that at this point in the business cycle, even though it doesn't necessarily feel that way, we're 75 months out from the bottom of the recession. We're 75 months into an expansion phase of the economy. The average post-war expansion period's only been 58 months. The longest is 120 months. That means we're less than 5 years away from setting a new record. And if we don't set a new record, somewhere in the very near-term planning horizon, hopefully several years out, not sooner, and hopefully not as severe as was experienced with the Great Recession, there's likely, based just on history, to be another round of pressure. And what is important to do, as this kind of exercise can hopefully help you to do, is to position yourself as well as possible to withstand that, or if it doesn't happen, continue to move forward even faster. And
So what you're saying is we need more pension reform.
I would certainly suggest that as one of the steps that can help to mitigate your risk, improve your financial sustainability. You've already got unfunded liabilities. They're not as bad as a lot of cities, and you've taken some key steps. But if you can extend those reforms across all of your employee groups, it would certainly, from a financial perspective, put you in a much better position.
Our unfunded liabilities have gone down dramatically because we borrowed $400 million, which we're still paying off, to make up the deficit, to make up the shortfalls in the pension. So there's a little bit of I think a lot of a misperception there. And someone may look at it and say, hey, these pensions are well funded, but we've got debt out there, hundreds of millions of dollars of debt that we're out there paying off, that aren't reflected in the unfunded liability statistic that we'll see is in terms of where we are. Yeah, our pensions are well funded, but we bought a lot of money that we owe to continue to pay them off.
Absolutely, and you're also contributing far more on an annual basis than you were 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and you've had to absorb that into your base budget. If you weren't still in the position of having to pay down the unfunded and keep that up, there'd certainly be substantially better resources available for other communities.
There was a time, I think Paul can confirm this, it was close to $100 million increase in our pension costs over a period of about a dozen years or so, somewhere around 90 million maybe, increase in our pension costs over about a 12-year period. That is, when you consider the size of our budget, that's a huge reason why we have all these challenges here that you put, and it's what's hard about it. It's politically hard to get stuff done. So as much as some want to try to get move forward and do the right thing so that we have healthy pension systems and still provide our employees with quality pensions, there are others who will buckle to political pressure and fight against it, which is what makes it so hard for all of us to get it done. And then with respect to the police department, and I'm just not saying this to you, I'm saying this to everybody. With respect to the police department, that is controlled exclusively by the state government, and they've already indicated they have absolutely no interest in even thinking about any pension reform. So that's part of our challenge.
So turning to page 10, as we think about some of the ways to position, we've just talked about one of the big ones. It happens to be a couple bullets down, but addressing your unfunded liabilities as actively as you can, and there may be some steps to think about in terms of your retiree health care liability, the actuarial assumptions you use, and kind of ways to prudently fund that within your available means. As Rebecca noted, having a more regular cycle of capital investment, and certainly understand there are political challenges there in terms of voter approval for geo bonding, but one of the observations that was pretty clear in our work was that of necessity during the downturn, a lot of capital investment's been deferred, and eventually that catches up to you and creates both service disruptions and fiscal pressures. Rebuilding the city's reserves, again, St. Louis is doing okay, but as you think about where you are in the business cycle, the continued commitment in that area and trying to get those up to and above your targets is important, and further trying to address structural budget balance. Now, with regard to structural budget balance, those recurring revenue streams and recurring expenses, we highlighted in the plan a number of conceptual areas. They're all familiar to you, I'm sure. They're ideas we've aggregated from the folks here who've already been working on them for many years. Some of the big ones involve the earnings tax, obviously enough, but it can't be repeated enough. Maintaining the kind of focus you all have on supporting and sustaining your tax base itself and the economic health and growth of the city. Another category of issues involves just updates to your revenue sources that don't automatically grow the economy. and particularly those major revenue sources that are structured as fixed or flat fees that haven't been adjusted, for some years, in the case of motor vehicle license fees for almost 20 years. Just modest updates for inflation or growing cost of service could help to sustain a more balanced structural position. Engagement of the city's major nonprofit institutions, I'll talk about that in a little more detail, and some potential ideas for increasing or adding some taxes around the edges of your overall tax portfolio to, again, try to get revenue growth up above that kind of 1 to 2% a year level that just makes it very hard, no matter how focused you remain on efficiency, to sustain core operations. On the spending side, there's been some positive steps with City Council partnership. Again, I know some of these are tough to achieve in the current environment, but that's an area of some ongoing opportunity. Healthcare costs themselves, your personnel folks have been doing a lot of good active work to keep those costs down, and the plan encompasses some potential next steps to continue to keep those affordable. We've talked about extension of the pension reform model that you've already put into place with your firefighters group. Some further opportunities to continue to look at staffing configurations and efficiency, and overall opportunities for productivity with functions like fleet and space usage and energy costs. And again, these concepts are fleshed out in somewhat more detail in the document you've already received, and they're by and large issues you all have worked on, and we're happy to answer questions. Did want to highlight, this is a final point, one of these opportunities around the issue of nonprofit contributions. As you know, St. Louis is fortunate to have a number of very strong higher education and healthcare institutions and other significant nonprofits. They have long been your partners in terms of the health of the city. And the question is, are there practices emerging elsewhere around the country, approaches that might be layered into those historical relationships to even further benefit and advance the city's goals? To some degree, we've seen places around the country look to their nonprofits to make financial and concrete service commitments beyond their legal liabilities as tax-exempt institutions. We're also really seeing an emerging best practice around other kinds of partnerships with anchor institutions, really engaging in more than just a dollars and cents way, but in a strategic partnership to plan together around how to meet key community priorities. There are a few examples of that from cities around the country on page 13. Not by and large revenue streams that will, in and of themselves, answer every question and solve every need, but at the same time, cities of comparable size generating meaningful new levels of resource that can make a difference on some priority issues that are tough to get to when every year it's another challenge to close that structural gap. Slide 14 talks about Boston's model, and Boston, admittedly something of a special case with the high concentration they have of higher ed and healthcare leaders, but they've developed a very structured program where they establish targets for nonprofit contributions that are associated with the underlying assessed value of the property those institutions hold. They exempt the first $15 million of assessed value from any target level, so smaller community-based nonprofits, most religious enterprises, and neighborhood-based groups are exempted. They set a target that's a fraction of what these institutions would pay if they were for-profit entities, and they've provided a structured way to look at and give credit for and appreciate and acknowledge those non-financial ways in which these institutions address their community's needs, whether that's joint policy planning, whether that's some of the work that can be done to promote home ownership and residential location of their employees within the city neighborhoods, whether that's taking over infrastructure. Baltimore's reached some agreements with some of their schools, private schools, to just take over median strip maintenance and landscaping and kind of infrastructure maintenance around their campuses in a way that relieves the city of some of that burden and also enables those institutions to have a positive environment to address their missions. So in terms of our overall thoughts about what to do with this long-range plan now that we've worked with you all to pull it together, we think it is important to work it, and we hope that this serves as a framework that's helpful for you as you continue to do what you've always been doing to close those gaps and address these needs, to help prioritize some of the initiatives that you might want to move forward first and think have viability, and operationalize those and track their progress. If that were, just as an example, to involve an approach for nonprofits and partnering or further partnering, building on existing partnerships with your anchor institutions, an approach might look something like what you see at the bottom of page 15. To capture and document a little bit more about who those nonprofits are, what the full effect of their exemptions is, how those break down by category of tax-exempt entity and size of tax-exempt entity, to bring together some of the key stakeholders, first internally to think about, what kind of partnerships do you think might make sense to pursue? Whether that's how much of that's going to be financial, how much of that's going to be strategic, and whether that might be targeted to specific priorities. Mayor Peduto in Pittsburgh is focusing his efforts to approach nonprofits on infrastructure. It's a priority he's identified. In other communities, it could be school partnerships. It could involve some of the initiatives coming out of the Ferguson Commission around crime concerns and the health of the community overall. Ideally, it would be something of broad interest to your major nonprofit institutions where they would really have a shared goal to collaborate with you in ways beyond financial. And I've highlighted the financial side of this because I am a budget guy. But again, the emerging best practice around this type of partnership is clearly to have a more meaningful joint effort with your major nonprofit institutions that isn't just a money grab, but that truly involves them in the same way that I know you all partner actively with your business community, and to some degree these folks as well already, in shared problem solving that hopefully will also include some additional incremental commitment of resources that can make Paul's job just a little bit easier from year to year. So our thinking would be, again, first think some of that through together. Relatively early in the process, invite, if you see the potential there after that discussion, invite your major nonprofit leadership to be part of the conversation as partners, not as a ask for dollars and cents right out of the gate, and see where that takes you. It is something that in different ways, specific to different cities, is proving to be an important part of fiscal and broader community health. So with that, happy to again to answer any questions. Appreciate the opportunity to work with you on this.
All right, certainly this is a lot of great information, and certainly will be helpful to us as we continuing our efforts to address the many challenges we have from a financial standpoint. So I certainly want to thank you. I mean, you guys have a quality organization. You've given us a lot of good advice in the past, and we certainly appreciate it. It's up to us as elected leaders to find ways to achieve the more realistic suggestions, and certainly, starting I think from some of the more easier things to get done. Some people call it low-hanging fruit. So this has been a good. We really appreciate the insight that you've provided and the work that you've done. Thank you. Anybody have any questions?
No, I just agree with what the mayor said. I think that you guys do a great job, and I appreciate the thought and the work that went into this year's report.
Thank you. For sure.
And the hard part is, and we know, I mean, we've been working together for a number of years now. We've done a lot of things to keep things going, and some tougher than others, but certainly we have our work cut out for us.
Yeah.
Thank you for your commitment, thank you for your hard work, and really, thank you for giving us these next steps. This is very good that you highlighted other cities that are looking at the not-for-profits, so that's something to give some thought to in terms of developing a task force. So, Mr. Mayor, you may want to get on that. I'll be sending it to you.
Yeah. Hey.
Yeah, so we can see what we can get done in that section.
All right.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Is that it? Anything else anybody
Paul,
wants
do
to
you
say?
have a question?
No,
You need it, you have a dollar
done.
amount? No?
Yeah.
Thank you
Thank
so much.
you.
Thank you very much. All right, I think that's all. If we have nothing else to be brought before this body, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
This meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
You.
Yeah,